about all things Messianic Judaism. Each episode, we will be sharing our opinions as we tackle some of the biggest issues in Messianic Judaism. Now, here's your hosts, Rabbis Eric, David, Jonathan, and Toby.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of MessianTics. I'm sitting here with Rabbi David, Rabbi Toby, Rabbi Jonathan, and myself. And if you're watching the news or keeping up with what's going on social media or anything that's going on in media at all this last few weeks, you've seen the uprisings, the protests, the things going on at the colleges and universities around the country in response to what's going on in Israel and Gaza, people that are protesting against Israel, trying to promote divesting from Israel, being actually many of them standing up with pro-Palestinian signs, some going as far as to be waving Hezbollah flags and saying we are Hamas and calling for a global intifada. So we wanted to talk about that today from our perspective. Understanding that this is a complex issue. It's complex because we're dealing with people, but it's very easy when you actually bring it down to just black and white or good versus evil in the context. So I want to begin by saying that many of these young people that are protesting really have no idea what they're protesting for or against. When they've been investigated or interviewed by commentators, by news media, and asked questions like what river, what sea, what is going on, all that, they'll answer that they don't even know. And many of these people that are interviewed don't even know where Israel is or that Gaza is part of Israel. So there's a whole segment of these college students that are protesting just because it's what's happening at their campus, and they want to be part of the in crowd that's there. So let's set those people aside for the discussion, at least at this point, and let's deal with the ones that are actually crying out for the destruction of Israel, that are pro-Hamas and state so, that are shouting from the river to the sea and meaning it, that are actually hollering against genocide while promoting genocide, because ultimately the Hamas charter and the statement from the river to the sea is calling for the complete annihilation of the Jewish state and its replacement being an Arab or Palestinian state on that territory. So don't be dissuaded by those who say from the river to the sea is just a cry for a Palestinian state, because the truth is those people that have been crying from the river to the sea for years have been offered a Palestinian state no less than 5 times and rejected it, because that Palestinian state would be next to a Jewish state, Israel. It's also important to note that if Israel is committing genocide, which they are not, but if they were doing it, they're doing the absolute worst possible job of committing genocide in history, because since Israel has existed, the group of people, the Arabs living within Israel, have grown dramatically in population in Israel itself.
Not only that, but the health ministry, or whatever they call it, in health ministry in Gaza, which is a Hamas-run organization, has come out in the past week and a half, and admitted that they severely fluffed the casualty numbers. And so where the entire world is running their mouth saying there's been 35 to 40,000 or so Palestinians in Gaza that have died, and take zero consideration into that there were combatants that were in that numbers too. But aside from that, the reason why the international media is running with those numbers is because Hamas's health ministry has been saying these are the numbers. Now they've come back and admitted we severely fluffed the numbers. It was actually closer to like 22 to 24,000 total casualties, with about I want to say it was something like 12 to 14,000 of that being combatants specifically. And so for for being a supposedly a genocidal regime in Israel, as these anti-Israeli protests, pro-Hamas protests are trying to ramble on and say. The fact that Israel has had, and this is from Hamas's own mouth, the fact that Israel has had a 1-to-1 civilian to combatant casualty rate is absolutely insane, because there has not been a war since mechanized war, and long before that, but since mechanized war, there has never been a war that had a casualty rate of civilian to combatant that was that low.
Yeah, it's interesting that as the media is discussing this and promoting this false narrative of a genocide being taken place in Israel, there are actually genocides that are being taken place in Sudan, other places in Africa right now that the media isn't talking about at all, as well as the Kurdish genocide that Syria tried to perpetrate just a few years ago. Yep. And all of that went on, and nobody in the UN was demanding a ceasefire to that.
The Chinese with the Uyghur Muslims
right,
that are still being persecuted and killed.
Yeah, so all that is going on a separate basis. Now, let me say this, and I believe that everybody at the panel here, everybody on the podcast would agree. None of us think that any child deserves to die. None of us believe any non-combatant deserves to die. None of us believe that any civilian, male or female, deserves to die. That when you look at it and say, but these people are dying, do you really think they deserve to die? The answer to that is no, but it's important to note that not one of those civilian casualties would have taken place had Hamas not attacked children, women, and civilians on October 7th, and Israel's response against this terrorist army called Hamas has been a direct response to that, and only that. On October 6th, Israel was operating under a ceasefire with Hamas. It was Hamas that attacked, and it's Hamas that hides in hospitals. It's Hamas that hides in schools. It's Hamas that hides in tunnels. It's Hamas that uses human shields. And it's Hamas that is the direct cause of every casualty of civilian that's taken place during this conflict.
And it's Hamas who has rejected all of the ceasefire attempts since this began. You know, on October 7th, they attacked. On October 8th, they cried out for a ceasefire. Before Israel ever fired a round, they cried out for ceasefire. Israel started to respond, to retaliate, and Israel has brought, I think it's been at least two ceasefire offers. That wasn't even saying, there's 133 hostages unaccounted for thus far. If I remember the numbers correctly, 133, I think it is, that are unaccounted for thus far still. Israel isn't saying, now they want them all back, but Israel's saying, for a ceasefire, you just give us 40 that fall under this international humanitarian category of women, children, elderly. Give us those 40. And by the way, Israel's offering like 700 terrorists to be released from Israeli prisons in trade for those 40 individuals. 10-to-1
ratio of...
And so far, we've heard two things from Hamas. One is, well, we don't know if we have 40 people alive anymore. And the other is, Israel said in this last attempt, which was in the last few days, this last ceasefire attempt in Egypt, Israel said, we want the 40, but we want a list of all of the hostages that are still alive. And Hamas said, we don't want to give you that. So they rejected the ceasefire because they don't want to give up the list of how many hostages who are civilians, Israeli civilians, are still alive. It's the fact that you've got idiots in college and university campuses that are running their mouths about, first off, crap they don't understand at all, like zero understanding of what's actually happening there,
right?
And are standing. And here's the thing about it, and I think it's really intriguing the way this is playing out. And I don't, not to shift the direction here any, but I think it's really intriguing how this is playing out, because the Islamic world, especially the jihadi Islamic world, has always said that Israel is the little Satan and America is the big Satan.
Right.
And they've always said, we're going to wipe out Israel and then we're going to start on America and we're going to wipe America out, the big Satan. And what is it that we have happening on college campuses right now? We have not only our American kids, idiot kids, protesting Israel and very anti-Semitic, very straightforward hatred of Jewish people, equating Zionism to white supremacy, which, ignoring the fact that genetically speaking, Jews are closer related to Middle Eastern and Northeast Africans than they are to any Caucasian group there is. Ignoring all of that, the fact that they're calling Israel, which is over 50% of Israelis are people of color, because they're, over 50% are Mizrahi or Middle Eastern and so on,
right.
Is absolutely insane. But then beyond that, you've now got these kids on these college campuses that are protesting against Israel, the jihadi Islamic world calls the little Satan, and are crying for a revolution, a socialist revolution in the U.S. So in this battle of words, this manipulation of the media and so on and so forth that is going on, what we're actually seeing is the jihadi Islamic world is kind of getting their own way, but they're not having to do anything. We're literally taking ourselves down here in the States because of this.
Right. And it's important, and if you're a Christian listening to this podcast, and I know that we have many that do, I want you to understand that if you listen to the misleading narrative that the Jewish people occupied a country called Palestine, and that the Jews, the Israelis, are occupiers of this land, I want you to understand that if you say that, you're calling Yeshua a liar. You're calling Jesus a liar, because at Yeshua's Last Supper, his Last Supper that churches celebrate and observe through either a Passover Seder or communion, when he said, as oft as you do this in remembrance of me, he was celebrating the Passover. The Passover celebration is a commemoration of Israel's leaving Egypt to go back to their ancestral homeland of Canaan or Israel. And Yeshua was celebrating this return to the ancestral homeland of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And when you say that Israel didn't own that land, you're calling your Messiah a liar by perpetrating a hypocritical expression and commemoration on the moments. This is hours leading up to his death, when he knew he was going to give his life for all mankind. The last thing he did was commemorate the return of the Israelites to the promised land in this Passover Seder. Now, it's true that the land of Israel had been occupied, but it was occupied by the Persians, the Babylonians, the Hellenists, the Romans, the Byzantines, the Arabs, the Crusaders, the Mamluks, the Ottomans, and finally the British. And the British returned the land of Israel to the ancient inhabitants, to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They went after the British occupation of the Promised Land. They returned it. Jews didn't occupy this land; they had it returned to them by the occupiers who occupied it and gave it back to them.
And they returned, and they actually gave it to both.
Yeah, and many.
They partitioned it out to this will be the allotment for the Jewish those who were coming in, settling from Europe at the time, having fled and survived the Holocaust, and then of course there were many Arabs who were living there that they partitioned it out as well, and of course when Israel declared itself its own nation, that's when the rest of a lot of their neighbors either fled or took arms against them. So.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting that most people don't remember, for whatever reason, because history doesn't appear to be an important thing, that when this took place, there were actually 3 nations that were formed. The Turks turned Lebanon over as a Christian country. Lebanon used to be the Christian country in the Middle East. So there was a Christian country called Lebanon established. There was an Arab country called Jordan that was established. And there was a Jewish country called Israel that was established. Now the Muslims took over the Christian country, Lebanon, and made it another Muslim country. And now they're trying to take over the Jewish country, Israel, to make it another Muslim country. But all of the land that is Lebanon, part of Syria, all the way across to Iraq, down across the top of Egypt, and all of the territory that is Israel and Jordan, all were part of the promised land that God ceded to the children of Abraham. And we need to be historically accurate when we talk about this, and remember that Lebanon was established at the time Israel and Jordan were established, in that same period of time, as the Christian partition of this land.
I just want to address that the problem with just shifting back towards the colleges. The issue with a lot of young people in that age bracket with issues and things like that is that it's ultimately just a fad. I'm even hearing about kids that are Messianic that are, saying they're ashamed of Israel and stuff. Like,
right.
I heard about that recently.
Right.
And I'm like, it's because all their friends on TikTok and social media are doing that stuff. It's just, it's important to make sure our young people are informed about all this stuff and understand the implications of supporting Israel and the implications of not supporting Israel. But I have a friend who, and I love this person, and I don't get on social media much, and there are many reasons for it. And this being one of them. I just think if you really want to get depressed, if you really want to get pissed off and be disgusted, then hang out on social media for a while.
Right.
Whether it's people's arrogance or hubris or just their absolute skewed views on things like Israel, then hang out on social media for a while. But I have a friend who is... understand this. This person does a lot of reposts of pro-Palestinian things and things like that, and what's going on these campuses and stuff. And I just want to let you know, this person that I'm talking about, I'm not going to mention names. This person I'm talking about is paid by an organization to protest.
Right.
So let me understand. Let's go back to. Let's just talk about a period of time when it was worth being out there, like the Civil Rights Movement. Let's talk about like those, like Martin Luther King, and a lot of Jewish people took part in the Civil Rights Movement because they understood why that was important. Those people were not getting paid. Those people that were getting shot at by fire hoses in southern cities and stuff, they weren't getting paid. These people weren't getting paid to do that. I mean, I'm sure some of them in organizations were getting. But you have a massive situation now, this massive machine that's paying people. And my thing is like, you're getting paid to do this, so you don't even really believe it. Man, I backed Israel, and when I wasn't getting paid for it. You know what I'm saying? I'm just one person, but I'm just saying you have this kind of situation where you have this systematic, institutionalized machine that's been mobilized, where you have people that I don't even think really believe this stuff, but they're going to get out there and spout it. They're getting paid for it.
Yeah, I mean, just because you're getting paid for something doesn't mean you don't believe it. Because I mean, they may very well believe what they're saying. Matter of fact, I believe a lot of them that are the bigger voices really do believe what they're saying.
I think some of them do believe it. I'm just saying also, I think money talks. I think you pay a young person to post crap on social media, I think some of them are going to do it.
Yeah, it's important also to understand that while this group of protesters want to say that they're a grassroots movement, when these protests on colleges began, they put up tents, and they were all the exact same tents. They had T-shirts that were all the exact same T-shirt. They all had their own Palestinian scarves that were distributed out. Right? The signs were pre-printed professionally. This is not a grassroots. Oh, something is happening. Let's all just go join in this.
That's what I thought when I saw the pictures. I was like, how did this happen so quick?
This was a professionally promoted event that was designed to draw attention, and the hope was that there would be a large police response that they could then join in with the other anti-police groups and build a bigger backup. So all of this was going on, and again, there's a small group of true believers, people that actually, they don't know what they're talking about, but they actually believe that the Jews are the oppressors and the Arabs are the oppressed, even though there's 29 Arab states and billions more Arabs than there are Jews.
What is it? They're 1% of the population?
Yeah, 1% of the population, or 3%, I think, maybe. Okay. But it's 1 to 3%. But it's a very small minority compared to the Arabs. And even though in Israel, Arabs have equal rights, in Israel, there are Arabs that are officers in their military and serve in the military. In Israel, there's an Arab on the Supreme Court. There are Arabs in the Knesset. There are Arabs, mayors in cities, Arabs. Even though Israel has no apartheid situation going on, and that the separation that happens within the boundaries of Israel is the Hamas, the Muslims, not allowing Jews to live in their areas, not the other way around. Any Arab that wants to be a citizen of Israel, that wants to state that they want to be part of Israel, is welcomed into Israel. It's just those that refuse to accept Israel's legitimacy that aren't allowed to be citizens. And by the way, you couldn't be a citizen of the United States if you didn't accept its... Come and become a citizen. If you're born here, that's one thing, but to come and... If you wanted to become a citizen of the United States, and when you went to say your oath to become a citizen, you said, I don't believe the United States has a right to exist, you would not become a citizen of the United States.
Right.
So Israel is not apartheid. It's not committing a genocide. But these people actually believe this because that's what their professors and others are promoting, this deception and this lie. So there's a small group that believe this, but the largest group are just those. There was a movie that came out years ago called The Majestic, and Jim Carrey is the star. And in the movie, he was accused of being a communist. And when he went to court over it, they asked him, well, you're a communist. We have proof because you attended this meeting of this communist party. And so if you're not a communist, why did you go? And he answered, because there was a girl there that I liked. Well, the reality is that a large percentage of these young people that are at these colleges are attending these rallies because they want to fit in. They want to be a part of whatever is going on at that time. Many of them just don't want to be othered in their schools, so they become part of what's happening. And the truth is that there's big parties going on during these protests. There's free food being provided. There's all of that. So there's a lot that are there not because they have an actual commitment. Not because they have an actual commitment to the cause, but they have a commitment to fit in with whatever's going on at that time. And they don't want to be outside of the group.
Yeah, I saw it. I know this may not speak very much, but I've seen it as a teacher when I taught public school, and even experienced it when I was in high school when our school system... Listen to this. This is the human condition, guys, if you're listening. This is how mob mentality works, and this is just human condition. When I was in 9th grade, the school system laid off a considerable percentage of teachers, and I remember it got down to the students, and some were really upset, and some started designing shirts and stuff to try to support all these teachers that are getting laid off. Well, then they staged a walkout, and let me tell you, people were walking out, and a lot of them did not care about their teachers' jobs. They wanted to get out of school. You're getting out of school. You're getting out of school. And that is what a lot of them were doing. And I remember a big crowd of students went outside, and I kind of followed the crowd. I'm telling you, I did it. Right. I wasn't yelling or anything, but I kind of followed the crowd. And I remember, I'll never forget him. He's actually one of the positive role models I had. He kind of said, "Hey, Toby, come here." And I walked up to him. I said, "Yeah." He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I just want to see what was going on." He goes, "Don't do that." He goes, "Don't buy into that." He goes, "A lot of these kids just want to be out of school if they don't care about these teachers' jobs." And I never forgot that moment, you know. It's so true, though. That's the human condition, man.
Right.
You know? And it's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate with young people. It's very unfortunate, you know.
Yeah, and when we're watching these young people who made the choice. Now, The truth is that in our country, you have the choice to protest. And I think that's important. I stand by that. I protest. Matter of fact, on coming up, we're having a Stand With Israel rally. We will publicly assemble to stand with Israel in our city. I support the right to do that. You don't have a right to violate the law in doing so. You don't have a right to destroy property. You don't have the right to block people from access to places, all those things. So when a young person in college decides they want to protest, they have a right to do that. If they miss classes to do that, they don't have a right to pass the class or to get retests or to get, because they made a choice. They made a choice to do one thing instead of doing another. And if you violate the rules of the university or college by choice, you made the choice to do that, you don't have a right not to be suspended or expelled, and you don't have a right to get forgiven for your student debt because you made a choice to not be in the class. It's a choice. You, as an adult, if you're in college, you are an adult, you made a choice to demonstrate your commitment or your commitment to the group that you're with. And so you do not get a free pass from the results of your choice.
Right.
But the thing is, though, is that what's the current state? Now, as we're talking, I just want to let you guys know, it's May 1st when we're recording this episode. What's the current state of things? I think last night on April 30th, or it would have been around midnight of May 1st, the New York City police actually went in and ran these protesters out, correct?
There's a couple campuses that they've made several arrests on.
But I think New York,
not just in
Columbia. I think in Columbia they actually occupied a building.
Yeah, I think when it's they just
Portland,
went in
last night
I think
to
in
get
Portland
them out.
they broke into a library or something, and so they went into, because at that point they were actually vandalizing. It had moved beyond protest.
You know it's getting bad, and this is again, we're talking from May 1st, 2024. You know it's getting bad when Democrats in the House of Representatives are telling these college campuses, hey, you need to do something about this. Do you want to know what it reminds me of? And I'm not trying to plug your age, Rabbi Eric. I was thinking about it this morning, but it reminded me of 1968 when the Democrats, they let things get out of hand in 68 with a lot of the Vietnam protests, and it got beyond out of hand. And the next thing you know, everything shifted to this new conservatism. And I think that's what Democrats are worried about. I think they're being like, hey, get it together, because Americans are watching this stuff.
Right.
You know,
Americans are kind of tired of it.
But I just absolutely,
Yeah.
And it's an election year, so it's going to be wild and crazy. But I just want to get back to the thing. I just wanted to talk about the current state of things. As of now, there's like a map that there's protests going on all over the place. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of it's in blue states. I think that can't be ignored. But
the ones that tried it in red states got shut down hard and fast.
Yes, I actually was talking to that about Dave this morning. I said, "Oh, look, no, not one here, not one here, not one here, not one here."
I forget where it was in Georgia that they sent in the Georgia state, because like the one state you don't want to get wrapped up with the troopers in is Georgia. They don't play
Georgia or Jersey.
Now it's this
military.
Now it's this whole meme on social media about the NFL draft recruiting a Georgia trooper for plowing some student protester down.
Yeah, it's true. They don't. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you.
No, you
but
didn't.
You made a really interesting point.
I was just lifting essentially lifting it for anyone, throwing it up for anyone to swing at. It's just where we're at now with it.
So I think it makes a massive statement when things with these protests, quote unquote, really more riots and hostile takeovers on these university campuses have gotten so bad that the mayor of New York City, Mayor Eric Adams, is saying that he's proud to be an American and commending the police for doing their job and coming in. I think especially considering how much garbage he's talked the last however many months and such, but the fact that he's going, commending the police department for going in and taking charge. And look, Rabbi Toby and I were talking about this on the way over to Pensacola today. The reality is, if these administrations on these universities had the chutzpah to do what they should have done from the beginning when things got out of hand,
right,
this wouldn't be an issue, and we wouldn't be talking
which was just
about
like
it.
Choke it out,
exactly, and it wouldn't be all over the media. Like, there is a way to have a legal protest. But destroying, defacing, and maiming university property, hostilely taking over quads and not letting people come through, blocking students, Jewish students particularly, from being able to go to classes and the library and so on and so forth, and thinking that they have the right as quote-unquote protesters to negotiate their way with the administration of the universities and colleges. It's idiotic. That's not how this works, and that's not what a protest is.
Right. If you're protesting, then you have a right to negotiate. If you're a violent riot or you're taking over, you're breaking the law,
right, that
changes the thing. Now, I do want to throw one thing in that we haven't talked about yet, and that is that while these protests were going, and I'm using the word protest even though we clearly see more than protesting going on.
Yeah.
While they were going on in places like Columbia and Yale and USC and other places, at the University of Florida, they had the largest Seder that took place in the United States, or reported to be the largest Seder, which about 1,600 people got together to celebrate Passover at their basketball facility, I believe it was. At one school in Florida, they were proclaiming the deliverance of Israel from Egypt and the place of Israel in history, while at other universities. So I just want to say, I don't want to say all schools are falling apart and everything. There's actually positive things that took place at the same time. But I'm not a Florida fan as a general rule, but I was like, go Florida when they did this. It was a huge turnout of students that came to this in the midst of the time when these protests were going on other places. So that's a positive thing that I think we need to look at and remember, and maybe we need to have more of that go on around the nation as people actually proclaim the importance of this. And if you're a believer in the Bible and the things the Bible teaches, then you need to make your voice heard. You need to call congressmen, senators, people like that. Let them know where you stand on this issue. And these universities, it's my hope. When I was younger, the KKK was still a big thing.
Sure.
The reason we don't hear much about the KKK anymore is because they got sued.
Right.
And their money, their property, all the things that they owned were taken from them.
Right.
And the economic impact of that basically did away with the majority of the effectiveness of the KKK. These groups that are funding these riots and keeping Jewish students and other students from, it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not, if you're a non-Jewish student and you are unable to attend your classes that you paid money for, and your civil rights have been violated, and it's my hope that lawyers will step up and there'll be large class action suits against these pro-Palestinian organizations that are funding these riots.
And they are being funded.
Right, they are being funded, and they can find the money, they can find who's doing it. Students for Palestine groups and stuff like that, Students for Liberation of Palestine is one of the groups that's funding this. The Rockefeller brothers is funding this. George Soros is funding this. And we know that because they know where the funds are coming from in some of these events. And it's my hope that not only will these students that are being forced not to go to school, not to be able to have graduations, that they will band together and we will see an end to these pro-terrorist organizations that are pushing Iranian, Hamas, and Hezbollah views in our country in the same way that we saw the demise of the KKK through, if the governments, for instance, if the New York, because Bragg, the DA in New York, that when they arrested these initial protesters for their violence and stuff, after they got arrested, their charges were all dropped. Now, I don't know about the new group that they arrested last night, but the original group, after they arrested them, they just dropped all the charges. There was no consequences at all for what happened. if the state governments and local governments aren't going to charge these people with these crimes, they need to be held accountable through financial punishment. Not only these students, but every one of these students that participated in these riots, not the protests, but the riots and protests, and these kept students from going, they should personally be sued for the cost of the extra policing, for the cost of the damage that was done to the schools and the properties, for the cost that was caused by extra expenses for the schools themselves, for the money that students paid for classes that they aren't able to take. All of that should be placed upon the individuals that participated in these riots, in these actions, in this crime, and those organizations that funded it.
Yeah.
And every instructor that participated in it should be relieved of duty.
It's a lot of them.
Absolutely. And they should be also included in those suits.
Yes. Yeah. And here's the reality about this, and we're talking about this from the perspective of these college campuses, but and we've talked about it in previous episodes. The truth of the matter is, anti-Semitism is on an exponential climb yet again, and the current crisis, the current war in Israel, is nothing but fodder for that. Now, don't get me wrong. That I'm not saying that the war is not a valid war, that it's not necessary, that what they're fighting for is not a good fight. That not at all. Like I'm totally on board.
But it's being used in talking points. As
exactly. But anti-Semitism, people are saying, well, we're not anti-Semitic, we're not Jew haters, we're anti-Zionists.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about a country of Jewish people. It's the only country. You have a number of Christian countries, a number of Muslim countries, a number of Hindu country, or a Hindu country, etc. You have all of these other countries that are religious countries. You have this one little sliver of land, smaller than the state of New Jersey, that is the Jewish homeland. Right. And you're saying that you're not anti-Jewish, you're not anti-Semitic, you're just anti-Zionist. What the reality is Zionists are Jews. And we're crying for a homeland to be protected from this reality, right? We tried to live peacefully in Europe. We tried to live peacefully in the Iberian Peninsula. We tried to live peacefully in what has become fanatic Muslim countries before they were fanatic Muslim countries, and so on and so forth. And everywhere we've attempted to exist, we've ended up having people attempt to slaughter us instead. And now we find ourselves in our ancestral homeland again, and yet again we have people trying to slaughter us. And now the growing international voice is, in essence, death to the Jews. Whether that's the words that are being used or not, to say Israel has to stop defending themselves and let Hamas do whatever they want, let Hezbollah do whatever they want, let the Houthis do whatever they want, let Iran do whatever they want, and Israel can't defend themselves, Israel can't do anything. It is a cry for the slaughter of the Jewish people. And there's no way to get around that. There's no way to interpret that as anything other than that reality. And we live in the 21st century. Like, this should not be accepted. This should not be allowed. This should not be a vocal point of communication, especially on Ivy League campuses, on universities and colleges across the country. France is I just saw an article this morning about the jiu-jitsu World Championships or whatever it was in that was held in Paris, and an Israeli won this one particular part of the competition, came in first, and the article was in essence about the fact that his victory, which he was a survivor of the what was the concert in south of Israel or outside of Gaza that was attacked.
The music festival.
Yeah, the music festival. I can't think of it. The Nova Festival. Yeah. He was a survivor of the Nova Festival. His best friend died in the attack on the Nova Festival. And here he is winning this jiu-jitsu tournament and dedicated his victory to his best friend that died at the attack. And they're playing Hatikva, which is the Israeli national anthem, in Paris because this Israeli jiu-jitsu fighter won this tournament, while at the same time Paris is raging in anti-Semitism. And so the article was focused on here, what should be this very special moment. This guy who barely survived is now winning this tournament, and Hatikva is playing as the national anthem of his homeland. Yet the article is France has become so anti-Semitic so overrun with anti-Semitism that it's a miracle that this song is playing here at this moment.
Yeah, good.
I was going to say I would present the argument that, when they say on campuses and things and countries and other places that we're not anti-Jewish, we're anti-Zionist, I'd be like, well, you're arguing against a non-thing. I would argue that there is no such thing as a Zionist today, because Zionism was invented in the late 1800s for the sake of developing a Jewish homeland. It was a desire to see a Jewish homeland so that Jews could live in relative freedom and peace, as they had not been able to do for the past, however many centuries. And so we have that now. There's a Jewish homeland now. Like, Zionism met its goal. You had Zionism to get a homeland. They have a homeland. So so when you argue and say, "Oh, I'm anti-Zionist," no, you're just anti the Jews having a homeland. Like, it is no longer anti-Zionism. It is just you are against the Jews having a place of their own that prevents them as a safe place. When Jews end up in danger in the world, who's the first one to pick up the call to rescue, to aid? Israel. Mm-hmm. And that is the one place that Jewish people can go to feel free to be Jews and not persecuted for being Jews. So,
and not only when Jews are in danger in the world, but when there's a natural disaster anywhere in the world, Israelis are the first ones to show up to help.
Yeah,
consistently.
So as we wrap up this episode today, I want to make one last statement, and then anybody else wants to throw something in, please do. But it's important to note that that Hamas and Hezbollah are puppets of Iran, that these students that are supporting Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran at this moment, the majority of them, if they lived in the countries that are run by Iran, by Hamas, by Hezbollah, they would be executed.
Yep.
They would not have the right to live in these countries, in these regions. If they lived in Gaza, they would be executed for the way they lived their lives. If they lived in Lebanon, they would be executed for the way they lived. If they lived in Iran, they would be beheaded, they would be tortured, they would be dragged, they would be hung publicly for the way they lived their lives.
Right.
And yet they're standing up against the only democratic country that they could freely live in favor of countries that would exterminate them just for being who they are.
Right. Yeah, before we end up closing this out, I do take a little bit of a different approach to assuming what students mean and intend when they participate in these things. Because a lot of it, it's just crowd mentality, it's mob mentality. Some of them being paid, they may not believe it. When you tell me you believe a thing, I believe you. Mm-hmm. I take you at face value. Because there's a lot of battles to fight in life, and trying to figure out if you're actually honest or not, or what angle you're coming from, is not a battle that I'm willing to engage in. If you tell me you are anti-Israel, pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas, pro-terrorism, I believe you. I'm not going to try and sugarcoat your own statements for you. I'm just going to take it as what it is. Now, I will say, for a lot of them, I do feel that they are victims in the information war. You have these combating ideologies that are very strong in their presentation. And so, if your information is coming solely from pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, pro-Iran, anti-Israel sources, and that's all you're getting, and if that's all you're surrounded by, whether it's apps or news or campus or your professors or your friends, because some of these friends have people they know from the Middle East, who are influencing international students, who are influencing, because it's different when you talk to a person, mm-hmm. And if someone let's say they come from Egypt or maybe even from Palestine, Gaza, and they're like, yeah, Israel's evil because X, Y, and Z. If you have a personal conversation with that person, it's going to impact you a little more than like the news will. And so someone tells you, hey, well, actually, if you listen to so-and-so online, they'll tell you that's not true. And they're like, well, I heard it from a real life person. So like, it must be more true because I heard it from a real life person as opposed to, your whatever, right-wing, news source they accuse you of listening to. But it's different. And I do take them, and I take them at face value. So I do think a lot of them are sincere. I think a lot of them that are gathering to protest, it's not just mob mentality. I think they're actually out there. A lot of them are actually out there to protest what they believe is a just cause. Again, I think they're victims of an information war, and they are being misled with bad information. And it reminds me of a quote that I heard the other day listening to a lecture on international strategy and warfare, which includes intelligence and information. The professor was talking, said that it's very easy to tell a lie. Regrettably, it takes a long time to get all the facts to prove it is a lie. So they're hearing a lot of sound bites and things from anti-Israel sources that are very easy to say and to repeat. They're very easy to turn into chants and hear again and again and again and to read again and again and again. And by the time you actually get the facts together to present them, they are already so caught up emotionally in what they believe is a just cause that they cannot think rationally. They cannot think with their all of their faculties.
Right.
And so it causes a problem. So again, I think they're sincere, but I think they're misled, which is, I think, a greater danger than just confused young people. I think it's a greater danger.
The one thing I want to say in closing is, and I said this to our community Passover Seder and a few other things this past week, is if you are a believer in Messiah, if you are a Christian, if you are a Messianic Jew or a Messianic Gentile, if you follow Yeshua, if you follow Jesus as your salvation, then you have an obligation, in my opinion. You have an obligation to stand with the Jewish people and to support the Jewish right to Israel as their ancestral homeland and as their own country. And here's why. Because the Word of God says that Israel was given by Hashem, by God, specifically to the Jewish people as an eternal inheritance from Him, as an eternal covenant from Him. You cannot at all truly believe that your salvation in Messiah is eternal if you do not also believe 100% that God's inheritance covenant promise to Israel for the land of Israel is also eternal, because He says eternal for both. And if you think He can flip the switch on Israel's right to the promised land, the Jewish people's rights to the promised land, then what says He can't flip the switch on your promised salvation being eternal? You cannot have it both ways. You cannot believe that God is done with Israel, but your salvation is eternal, when His promises and blessings to Israel were eternal. You can't have it that way. It doesn't work. Either your God is faithful and true when He says eternal, or your God is a liar, and you cannot believe in Him. But either way it goes, if you're going to cry out on the name of the promised Jewish Messiah, you must biblically also support Israel and their right to have the promised land, Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, as their eternal inheritance covenant. And the reality is the modern state of Israel, though not perfect by any means, the modern state of Israel is a prophetic existence. The fact that it has been reestablished is a prophetic promise becoming reality before our very eyes, and a piece of the puzzle of the return of Mashiach, of the return of Messiah. And so for there to be people that call themselves believers in the promised Jewish Messiah, that are anti-Semitic, that are standing with a terrorist organization in support of a terrorist organization against Israel, that are crying that Israel is being genocidal, while the very people they're supporting have point blank verbatim said their sole goal is to be genocidal against Israel, is absolutely idiotic. And it is absolutely unbiblical, and it is absolutely not in the least showing the character and nature of Yeshua, the Messiah of Israel. And with that, we are going to say thank you for joining us today. Continue to pray for Israel. Continue to pray for all of those on both sides of the line that are innocently drawn into the mix of this and are dealing with the consequences of it, and continue to seek the face of the Lord in this situation and all that approaches us as we move towards this crazy political season that lies ahead of us as well. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the MessianTics podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you can be notified every time we drop a new episode. And be sure to follow and interact with us on social media at MessianTics Podcast.